I'm in my early 30s now, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the hardworking daughter living under the watchful eyes of my traditional parents. Growing up, my life wasn't about fun or taking breaks. I worked hard, saved every penny I could, and quietly built my little savings over 10 long years. No vacations, no fancy dinners, no luxuries, just pure dedication. My goal was simple: to buy my own house someday. It was my dream, and I kept it close to my heart, never telling anyone because I didn't want any distractions or expectations. But living in a family like mine, nothing is ever simple. My parents always compared me to my younger brother. He was their pride, their shining star. Every achievement of his was celebrated, while mine seemed to barely register. "Look at your brother, how well he's doing," they'd say, like I wasn't trying just as hard. It was painful, but I stayed quiet. I believed my time would come. Then things started to change. The pressure on me increased, but not for my work or my dreams. Instead, it was about something else: marriage. One evening, during a regular family dinner, everything shifted without warning. My parents invited their friend's son over, a wealthy man, handsome and polished. They started talking about how perfect we would be together, how this match would secure the family's future. I felt my heart tighten. No one asked me what I thought or wanted. The words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. They expected me to say yes, to agree silently as always. But something inside me stirred, a quiet rebellion I hadn't felt before. When they finally asked me outright, I looked at them and said, "No, I'm not interested." The room went still. The smiles disappeared. My father's eyes narrowed, my mother's face tightened, and my brother smirked like I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. That night, the air was thick with tension, and I knew my simple no had opened a door to something much bigger than just a dinner conversation. The pressure wasn't going away. It was only beginning. After that tense dinner, I thought maybe things would calm down, but they didn't. A few nights later, I was in the kitchen getting a glass of water when I heard my dad's voice through the thin walls. He was on the phone, speaking in a low, angry tone that I had never heard before. I didn't mean to listen, but the words caught my attention. "I lost $200,000, he was saying, voice sharp and desperate. "How am I supposed to pay this back now?" My heart dropped. $200,000? That was a huge amount. Suddenly, pieces of the puzzle started falling into place. The sudden push for me to marry that wealthy man wasn't just about tradition or family honor. It was about money, my family's money. My dad was in deep trouble, and they planned to fix it by using me as a bargaining chip. I realized the marriage proposal was no proposal at all. It was a setup. They wanted to recover his gambling debt by marrying me off to someone who could bring a big dowry or invest in their failing business. And my brother? He wasn't innocent either. A few days later, I caught him smirking and saying, "You have to take one for the team. It's just how things work in this family." That cut me deeply. The person I thought I could trust the most was already on their side. I remembered all the times I had helped them financially without hesitation. I gave money when my dad said he needed to pay bills. I lent my brother cash when his investments failed. I even helped with my mom's small shop when sales were slow. I thought it was love and duty. Now I felt used and betrayed. One evening, when I confronted my mom, hoping for some support, she looked at me coldly and said, "This is your duty as a daughter. You're supposed to help the family. Marriage is how you repay what you owe." Her words were like a slap. How could love be so cruel? The threat started soon after. "If you don't agree, don't expect any help from us," my father warned. "You'll be cut off from everything. No money, no family support, nothing." They made it clear that refusing the marriage meant I was choosing to be alone. But even with all the pressure and threats, I couldn't say yes. I had worked too hard for my independence and my dreams. I wanted to live on my own terms, not as a pawn in their game. So I stood firm and said, "No." I didn't yell or cry. I just said it calmly, hoping they would understand. They didn't. The room fell silent again, but this time it was heavier than before. I knew my refusal had changed everything. It wasn't just about marriage anymore. It was about loyalty, money, and betrayal. And I was ready to face whatever came next. Christmas Eve was supposed to be a night of warmth and family, but for me, it turned into the darkest evening I've ever faced. The house was full of relatives, laughter echoing through the rooms, the smell of roasted turkey and sweet pies filling the air. But beneath that cheerful surface, I could feel the cold eyes of my parents and brother watching me like I was an outsider. Which by the end of the night I truly was. As dinner started, my father stood up holding his glass high. The room fell silent, all eyes on him. He cleared his throat and said with a proud smile, "To our son, the pride of the family." His voice was strong and sure, but the words cut deep because my name wasn't mentioned, not once. It was a deliberate silence, like I didn't exist or wasn't worthy of even a toast. My heart pounded, but I stayed quiet, trying to keep my composure. Then my brother, with a smug grin, leaned over and said loud enough for me to hear, "At least one of us has a future." His words were mocking, filled with cruelty, and the laughter that followed from some relatives made it even worse. I felt like I was trapped inside a nightmare. After dinner, my parents took me aside and handed me a thick envelope. Inside was a legal document that changed everything. They were officially removing me from the family will. No more inheritance, no more shares in the property I had hoped to buy one day with the savings I had worked so hard for. It was like they wanted to erase me completely. When I looked at my mother, hoping for some kindness, she said coldly, "Girls don't need inheritance. You'll be married anyway. That's how things work." Her words felt like a slap in the face. They had already decided my future for me, not as a daughter but as a tool to be used for their plans. I wanted to scream, to fight back, but I didn't. I quietly gathered my things, feeling the weight of betrayal settle on my shoulders. I packed what I could carry and left the house without saying a word. The empty house behind me felt like the empty promises of a family that once meant everything. Walking away that night, I felt lost but also strangely free. They had tried to break me, but I wasn't going to let their cruelty define who I was. I knew I had to find my own path, even if it meant standing alone. And deep down, I was already planning how I would turn this betrayal into my strength. After leaving my family that cold Christmas night, I moved to a small town far away from everything I knew. I stayed with an old college roommate who welcomed me without any questions, just open arms and quiet support. It felt strange at first, being so far from home, away from my parents' constant pressure and my brother's mocking smile. But it was exactly what I needed: space to breathe, to heal, and to start over. I decided to open a small consulting business. I still had some of my savings left, the money I had quietly kept aside for years. It wasn't much, but it was enough to rent a modest office and cover my basic expenses. Starting was hard. Some days I felt overwhelmed, wondering if I had made the right choice. But as the weeks passed, more clients began to trust me, and slowly my little business started to grow. Work became my therapy. Every problem I solved, every small success I achieved helped me forget the pain my family had caused. I threw myself into my work with determination and passion. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about proving to myself that I could build something meaningful without anyone's help or approval. One day, unexpectedly, I reconnected with an old college friend. We had lost touch over the years, but when we met again, everything felt familiar and comforting. During our conversations, she shared something that stunned me. She told me that the man my parents had pushed me to marry was a fraud. He had been married all along. In fact, she was his real wife. Hearing her story was a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, I felt disgusted that my parents had tried to trap me in a marriage with someone so dishonest. On the other hand, I felt a strange sense of relief. At least I hadn't made the mistake they wanted me to. Knowing the truth gave me a new strength. With her help and connections, I quietly began buying properties one by one. The most important was my childhood home, the same place where my parents had tried to control my future. It felt like reclaiming a piece of my past and turning it into my future. Each property I purchased was a small victory. I wasn't just rebuilding my life, I was creating a new legacy, one I could be proud of, built with my own hard work and resilience. The pain from my past still lingered, but it no longer controlled me. I was finally free to write my own story. After all the years of struggle and pain, the moment I had been waiting for finally came. One afternoon, I heard from a reliable source that my parents' house, the very house where I had grown up and later left in silence, was going up for sale. The reason was clear: unpaid debts. The same debts that had slowly crushed their pride and forced my family to fall apart. I felt a surge of emotion. I knew I had to act fast. I didn't want to confront them directly. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I decided to use every bit of the knowledge I had gained running my business. I hired a trustworthy third-party real estate company. Someone who didn't know me, someone who could buy the house quietly without raising any suspicion. The transaction went through smoothly. My parents never guessed the new owner was their own daughter. Owning that house was more than just a real estate purchase. It was a symbolic victory. This was the place where I had been belittled, ignored, and pushed aside. Where I had been told I didn't deserve anything because I was a girl. Now it was mine. The renovation process was exhausting but therapeutic. I poured every penny, every hour, and every bit of energy into transforming the house. I wanted it to shine. Fresh paint on the walls, polished hardwood floors, new lighting, and even a beautiful garden where we used to sit as a family before things fell apart. Every detail was carefully planned and executed. The house became a reflection of my strength and resilience. But owning the house was only the beginning. I wanted to make a statement, one they would never forget. So I sent out invitations for a family reunion dinner. I made sure my parents, my brother, and even the rich guy, the one they had tried to marry me off to, would all be there. None of them suspected who had invited them or why. On the evening of the dinner, I watched through the windows as the guests arrived one by one. They walked in confidently, thinking this was a chance to pitch their ideas to a new businessman. They had no idea the power dynamic had completely shifted. When everyone was seated and the chatter had filled the room, I stepped out from behind the curtains. I wore a tailored formal suit, sharp and elegant, the kind of outfit that demands respect. I could see the surprise in their eyes as they turned to look at me. Some faces showed disbelief, others confusion. My heart beat steadily. This was my moment. "You're standing in my living room," I said clearly, my voice calm but full of authority. My father tried to laugh, but it came out forced and hollow. "Very funny," he muttered, trying to dismiss me. But I wasn't joking. I held up a remote and pressed a button. The large screen on the wall lit up and old footage began to play. The room fell silent. First there was a clip of my father, smirking cruelly, mocking me in front of others. His voice dripping with contempt as he laughed about my naivety, and how I was nothing compared to my brother. Then came scenes from that terrible Christmas Eve years ago. My parents humiliating me publicly, raising their glasses to my brother while ignoring me completely. I watched their faces closely as the videos played. The smugness drained away. My mother's lips trembled. My brother's eyes flicked nervously to the floor. And the rich guy, the fraud who tried to marry me, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I waited for the videos to end before speaking again. "You treated me like I was nothing," I said. "You threatened to cut me off, you tried to erase me from your family, and you thought I would just disappear quietly. But I didn't." I took a slow step forward, letting my words sink in. "This house was supposed to be your legacy. But now it's mine. Every brick, every corner, every inch belongs to me." My brother looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "You always thought you were better than me," he muttered. But his voice was weak, lacking the usual arrogance. I smiled gently, but there was no warmth behind it. "I never thought I was better. I just worked harder. I saved when you spent. I stood up when you backed down." Turning to my parents, I said, "You tried to control my life through marriage and money, but you forgot one thing. I'm stronger than you ever gave me credit for." My father's mocking smirk was gone. Instead there was a flicker of fear or maybe regret. My mother blinked rapidly, fighting back tears. I could see the walls they had built around themselves beginning to crack. That night, the house that once held so many painful memories became the place where I finally took back my power. I didn't just reclaim my family home. I reclaimed my identity. I was no longer the silent daughter who followed their rules. I was the woman who faced betrayal, fought back, and won. The perfect twist wasn't just owning the house. It was standing tall in the same room where I had once been humiliated and showing them that I was the one who had changed. The quiet, determined daughter had become a force they couldn't ignore. As the night ended, I watched them leave, shaken, defeated, and realizing that I had turned their cruelty into my triumph. I smiled quietly to myself, knowing that this was just the beginning of a new chapter. My story wasn't over. It was only getting started. The moment the video stopped playing, a heavy silence filled the room. No one dared to speak. Felt like time itself had paused. Everyone's faces were frozen. My parents looked stunned, the rich guy fidgeted nervously, and my brother's usual confident smirk was nowhere to be seen. Instead, he looked small, uncomfortable, like he finally realized how badly he had underestimated me. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folded legal document they had given me years ago, the one that cruelly cut me out of the family will. I unfolded it carefully and held it up so they could all see it. My voice was calm but firm as I said, I may not be in your will anymore, but you're now living under mine. The weight of those words hung in the air. It wasn't just a statement. It was the truth that shook everything they thought they controlled. For years they tried to control me through money, threats, and humiliation. But this time I had turned the tables. My brother was the first to break the silence. He took a shaky step forward, eyes lowered, voice almost a whisper. "I'm sorry," he said. "I never really understood what you went through. But I didn't want to hear apologies, not from him. Not after all the nights he laughed at me, the times he gloated about having the future." I simply shook my head and walked away, leaving behind the house, the family, and the lies. That night, as I closed the door behind me, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. Months later, one quiet morning, I opened my laptop and saw an email from my father. The subject line was short and desperate: help. I hesitated before opening it. When I finally did, I read the message: "We need help paying off a tax lien on the house. Can you send some money?" I smiled, thinking of all the times they had taken money from me without asking. The times I had silently sacrificed to keep this family afloat. But now the power had shifted. I was no longer their victim. I typed a reply, my fingers steady and calm: "Ask your son. He has the future, remember?" I sent the message and closed the laptop. Pouring myself a cup of coffee, I walked over to the window of my office. The office I had worked so hard to create over the past few years. I leaned on the windowsill and looked out at the city waking up. The sunlight warmed my face and I felt a quiet pride settle inside me. My story isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming my worth. For years I believed my value was tied to their approval, that I had to be the obedient daughter, the perfect sister, the one who quietly gave up her dreams. But life taught me differently. True worth comes from standing up for yourself. From working hard when no one is watching. From refusing to be defined by the cruelty or greed of others. I thought back to the long nights I stayed up working late to build my business. The times I held back tears when my parents pressured me to marry someone I didn't love. The moments I said no, even when it felt like the whole family was against me. Those moments shaped me. They made me stronger. And now, as I stood in my own space, a space I had earned, I knew I had won. Not by hurting them back. Not by seeking revenge. But by living my truth. By creating a life on my own terms. As I sipped my coffee, my phone buzzed softly. It was a message from an old friend. Someone who had been there when I was at my lowest. "Proud of you," the message read. I smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with money or power. It was the warmth of being seen and valued for who I truly was. That night, as I closed my eyes, I didn't dream of riches or revenge. I dreamed of peace. Of a future where I was free. And that, more than anything else, was my greatest victory.